welcome back, folks. Hey, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Mature Audiences Only. I wanted to try something a little different this time around for the video podcasting. I kind of thought, like, why don't we try something a little more candid, something a little more natural? I like having a fun, groovy background, but I'm just trying different things out. Anywho, we're back. I know that I promised you guest hosts going forward, and that's true. I didn't lie. We are going to have guest hosts, and I'm super freaking excited because we have some really cool guest hosts coming up, people that have been to prison, people that work in the field and have just really interesting and crazy jobs. We're going to have those people on, and in fact, I've already had a couple of interviews, and we're in the final process of the editing, and we had our super cool first guest host last week, Natalie Harrison. Woo! Shout out to Natalie. I had such a freaking blast. I thought that was so much fun. And I'm so stoked that I received so much good feedback from you guys on it too. You guys like Natalie more than you liked me. And I knew that would happen because Natalie is just the coolest. She brings out the best in everyone. And I think she did amazing on the show. And I think it really reflected in the show. But I think if we slowly coerce and manipulate her into wanting to be on the show full time, she might, maybe, grant us that pleasure.
And the best part of this plan is no one can stop me.
I'm just kidding, folks. But we'll see. So in the meantime, I think just so it feels like Natalie's still in my presence, or maybe that I'm talking to someone, I'm thinking like I'll just get like a blow up doll or maybe like a life-size mannequin, and I'll just have it sitting next to me. That way it feels like I'm talking to someone and the conversation will just be that much more organic. 80% of the ocean hasn't been explored, which means that it's a mysterious place. If there's anything mysterious, like we think we have a grasp or even like a mental grasp on what the ocean is and what's in it. But in reality, we've only seen a very small fraction of the ocean. And for that reason, not only is the ocean mysterious and spooky, mysterious, I personally think the ocean is like the spookiest place ever. I love the ocean. I love being by the ocean. It definitely makes me a happier person. But there's never a time when I'm in the ocean.
Laos. We the ocean.
The ocean? What ocean?
That I feel comfortable, especially in deep water. I am so freaked out when I'm in the ocean in deep water, even in a pool. When I'm in a deep pool by myself, which isn't often, but I still, and I don't know if you guys experience the same thing, there's just this uneasiness to it where you're like, what's lurking beneath me? For my personal experience, this crazy irrational fear stems from my father showing me the movie Jaws when I was really young. Like, I think we first watched it when I was like 5 years old.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
And it's a killer movie, pun intended. It's a good movie. It's great. It's a classic. And if you haven't seen it, you should see it. But if you watch it, it just does give you this impending fear of the ocean. And so for me personally, the movie Jaws is definitely like where my fear of the water started, and many people. Why does this even relate to today's topic at all? Today's topic involves something that happened at the ocean. So today's tale is spooky not only due to the oceanic aspect, but also because it's a mystery. It hasn't been solved. And with any and all evidence pointing towards a sinister yet unexplained conclusion, and the boat involved in today's story also is considered to be one of history's most famous ghost ships. Yes, Ghost Ship. Remember that movie where basically the first scene is the only scary part, where they're all partying on the ship and then they all get cut in half and it's all crazy. But then the rest of the movie is like, nah. Yes, just like that. Today, we're looking into the case of the Ourang Medan ship. So it's Ourang Medan. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Some ducks just freaking dive bombed our house. Oh my God. So today we're talking about the ship called the Ourang Medan. So like orangutan meets megalodon. So Ourang Medan. And it kind of rhymes with like dong. So like the orangutan Hangs Dong, and it was a Dutch ship. Okay, so it all started in 1947 when ships traveling on the Strait of Malacca, which is located between Sumatra and Malaysia. And so the Malacca Strait was a very popular, essentially like a travel area. It was kind of like a hallway in the ocean. So it was a very popular area that cargo ships and people that were trading and bringing supplies would go through. However, that strait also has a little bit of a creepy history. Over time, 30 ships have sunk in that strait, and it's not confirmed if it's haunted or what's going on in there. But many ships have fallen ill to this channel, this area. So it already kind of has a spooky history. In 1947, there was a ship traveling on the Malacca Strait and received a troubling distress call via Morse code, because back then you didn't have phones on ships where you could just call up and say, hey, how's it going? Or hey, we're in distress. You had to use Morse code, which was like a tap, tap, tap. A boat called the Silver Star was traveling nearby this strait. They were about to go through it, and they received a troubling distress call. And the first message read, quote, all officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly the whole crew died, end quote. And so following that first message, a second message came through, and it was essentially just gibberish. It was just like a bunch of taps. It didn't really make out into anything. However, the technician of the Silver Star was still closely paying attention, because he was like, oh shoot, like that's super weird. And then finally, as the technician is watching these random messages come through, a final message comes through, and that one reads, quote, I die. They heard that and they were like, ooh, like that's a bad sign. Definitely not one of the best signs when you receive a message like that saying everyone's dying and I die. Ah! Finally, the technician received this information and he goes right to the captain. He's like, listen, we received this crazy distress call. There's only one other ship nearby, but they're further away. It looks like we're the closest ones to the ship, so I think we need to be the ones that need to go and get them. And so the captain hears this and he's like, I completely agree. We got to go help these guys, find their coordinates, and let's go. On a side note, I just feel like at what point when you're like a ship person or like a seaman, at what point where it's like, help, everyone's dying.
We are all gonna die!
At what point is it like, should we not compromise our ship and not go help? Probably not. I have a feeling like if something like that's happening, you go and you kind of assess the situation and I guess you approach at that point. But if there's something out there that took out a whole ship, I feel like you probably want to exercise with some caution. But I'm sure there's like laws of the sea, right? If any seamen or any people that like know boat rules, my cat is such a trip. I feel like he hears a noise and he's like, anywho, if there's any seamen out there that can confirm, like, what are the laws of the road or like laws of the sea? Do you have to come save people? Like, it's probably just like those rules too, like the captain has to go down with the ship or the captain has to be the last person on board. I could see that happening. Okay, so they heard that and they're like, oof, that's a bad sign, but we have to go save them. So they went. And so they pinpointed the coordinates and they set out for the SS Ourang Medan. And so they got to this ship, and as they approached it, it wasn't sinking, it wasn't visibly on fire or anything like that. Like, it looked to be in pretty good shape. However, as they were approaching, they noticed that there was no one on board. They didn't see any other seamen. They saw no one. And the ship was just in decent shape. However, they did notice that there was no power on to the boat. Like, it was just completely dark in there. And it was just floating aimlessly in the middle of the sea. Like, they could tell that the motor wasn't on, so it was just kind of drifting with the current. And that's super strange because typically a boat will either be anchored or it'll be having the engine on, and it won't just be drifting throughout the ocean. Oh, no. So that was kind of strange. So they approached with caution. They saw that nothing was on fire. The ship wasn't actively sinking. There wasn't a rustle and a bustle on the ship that they can see. So they determined that it was safe to get on. Like, if it were me, if I didn't see anyone on the ship, no one on there, my ass would be in the back like, maybe this is a bad idea. Like, there's a reason why. Maybe we should call in for backup. I'd be a Debbie Downer in this whole situation. These ship guys, on the Silver Star, they blow their horn, they try their Morse code one more time, like tap, 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 just to get any type of answer from this other ship, because they're just like, what's going on here? Like, we came to help you. They sent out these messages and they didn't hear anything back. So they determined that it was time for them to hop on aboard and do like a search and rescue kind of a thing. Maybe they had gone inside and were hiding in the cabins. Maybe they were stuck down below in the boiler rooms. They didn't know. So they realized that they had to go in and check it out. They take their ropes and they secure it so that they can like bring the other boat in like towards them so they can tie it together and hop on and approach their boat. And so they boarded the ship, and as they're walking around, there's literally no sign of anyone on the ship. They're walking around, they don't see anything in general at first, but they were just on the side of the boat right now. It was a big boat, so they start walking towards the nose of the boat. I'm not sure what the nose is called. The bow and the stern. No, the stern would be the back. I don't know. You like how I don't Google it either? I'm not sure, but they went towards the nose of the boat. And as they get to the front of the boat, they're horrified about what they saw. They get to the nose of the boat and there's bodies scattered everywhere. Human bodies of the crew of the SS Ourang Medan. And they're just everywhere. Each and every one of their faces was construed in such a way as if they had seen something very horrifying that had attacked them like right before their death. Like they had these very horrified looks on their faces. Disturbingly enough, everyone's bodies were completely frozen. So they had experienced a very swift rigor. And typically, if that happens, people will obviously freeze and get rigor mortis in different positions. However, all of these bodies had something in common. Everyone's bodies were frozen in place and their arms were bent in like an L shape and their fingers were all spread out as if they were trying to defend themselves from something, as if something had attacked them and had caused them to have this horrific look on their face, as well as their arms up trying to protect themselves. And all the bodies were just stuck in this position. And it was just so strange because it wasn't just one person that looked like this. It was everybody. Like everybody looked like this. This was also especially weird because they had literally just received that distress call. Like, rigor mortis sets in pretty quickly. As soon as someone dies, it gets set in pretty quickly. But it was just so strange that they had literally, not even a couple hours before, they had just received this distress call. I wouldn't be on that boat, personally. We know. I'd be on the other boat. I'd be like, we need to call some experts to do this because this isn't our job. We're a cargo ship. I'm not a swift rigor expert, but we got to call on, like, the experts for this. Like, I'd be the voice of reason, but the right thing would be to keep searching. So they do the right thing that you should probably do in one of these situations, and they keep looking for survivors, and eventually they come to the captain's deck. And so he was on the bridge. So the bridge is essentially the captain's like area where they drive the ship. So that's like where all the controls are and they're steering everything. And so they go in there and they find the captain. He was still up there, so he clearly died as he was controlling the ship. And they kept looking around, and then they came across something that was additionally super scary. The communications manager guy, he was the guy doing the Morse code, the tap, 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 the one that was like, everyone's dead, everyone's dying, and now I'm dying, ah! They found him, and he had died mid-tap. He was still in his chair, slumped forward, and he had died tapping. Literally, he went out sending that message out. Thank God for him, because if he hadn't done that, then no one would have found them for a while. Maybe until the ship eventually crashed in somewhere, or just eventually wandered so far that finally people decided to like investigate. Okay, so they're like, wow, this is the most horrific scene I've ever seen in my entire life. You know what's a good idea? Let's keep going. Let's go to the bowels of the ship, the place where it's nearly impossible to get out in case an emergency happens. So they walk all the way down there, and it's the exact same thing. There were bodies of the crew just spread out everywhere. And everyone's arms, the same thing. They were all stuck in front of them as if they had been trying, like as if something horrific had attacked all of them. But the strange thing about it, guys, is as they were looking at everyone's bodies, they realized none of these people have any scratches on them. They have no injuries. Everyone's bodies are intact. They're purple and green because everyone's dead, but no one has any injuries. All the bodies are intact, no major bruising, nothing. Even the crew had a dog, and he was a nice little boat dog, and he had died as well. Same thing. They found him very stiff. His face was basically, it looked like he was snarling. His lips were curled up and his nose was all scrunched, and his teeth were bared as if he were growling and snarling at something. As they got lower and lower down to the ship, close to where the boiler rooms were, the boilers were still burning and operating because it wasn't a couple hours earlier that the crew was still working there before everyone died. So that boiler area, as you get lower, it gets really hot because whether they were using coal or what have you, I'm not sure what goes into boiling. I'm not a boiling expert. But it had been boiling down there still. Emphasis on the boiling. Okay. So moral of the story is that it was still super hot down there. And so they're down there, it's hot, but they all noticed something similar. They all mentioned that they just had this really eerie feeling come over all of them. And they had a cold shiver that came over them. It was like 100 degrees down there, like 105 degrees. Like, it was hot. But they all got this same cold shiver. They had determined we've seen enough. So they retreated back to their own ship because clearly there weren't any survivors. So they're like, okay, let's go back to our ship. Let's reconfigure. Let's tow this boat back to civilization, and then we'll have the experts take a look just to see like what happened, perform an autopsy, and all that hullabaloo. They go back to their boat. And they're like, okay, everything's fresh in our minds. Let's go ahead and start notating exactly what we saw because more information is the better. As they were taking notes down, that's when they realized, like, oh shit, did any of them have any wounds? No, none of those guys had wounds. Like, they were all perfect. Like, their bodies were all intact. Like, nothing was wrong. Like, that's kind of strange. Oh, that's not good. As they were in their ship, they're like, okay, we've done that. Let's go ahead and tow the Ourang Medan back to civilization. And as they were doing that, they started to notice that the air around them was getting kind of hazy. And they're looking around like, why is it getting darker? And then they start smelling, they're smelling smoke. And they're like, oh, is there like a fire? Like, what's going on? And so they run over to the side of the ship just to see like where this smoke is possibly coming from. And they notice that the smoke, it's coming from the Ourang Medan. It catches on fire. Like, the entire ship started smoking and then it caught on fire. And so they're watching the ship just burst into flames. And so they like look at each other like, oh shit, like we can't let our ship catch on fire. So they cut the line and the boat just sort of drifted off. And they watched this ship. And it was catching on fire and fire. And as it drifted further away, and they were booking it away from the ship, they're like, we got to get out of here. So they book it. And then they're all watching at this spectacle of this ship that they were just on. They watch it as it goes up in flames, and then all of a sudden it explodes. And the force from this explosion was insane. The crew members that were on that ship, they recounted the whole situation, and they said that the force was so great from the explosion that they saw it lift from the water. Like, it exploded and the entire vessel lifted out of the water as it exploded, and then came down and caused a huge wave and everything. And then it slammed back into the sea, sinking to its murky grave, taking all of its secrets and all of the answers of what had happened here today with it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, everyone just wants to know, what horrible thing did this crew witness before they died? What happened? Like, this isn't, we all share the same world. Just because something spooky happens in one area doesn't mean it can't happen in our area, you know? Like what happened? Like, we're all kind of curious, you know? And news eventually broke out about this mysterious mass killing or mass death that happened at sea. And naturally, people started looking into it. And so they're like, okay, let's start from square one. Where is this ship from? What's going on with the ship? All right, hi, I'm back. We're re-picking up. This is the next day. I recorded that on Thursday, and now it's Friday because my camera died. My camera, it's a good camera. It just has like the worst battery. It only lasts for like 45 minutes. So I'm working on that. But my hair's straight now. But it doesn't mean that the story's any less good. We got a few more spooky aspects of this story. And so a lot of people obviously want to know more of like a concrete answer. And possibly one of the most strange aspects of the account of the Ourang Medan was that the ship itself was never actually registered with any like marine listings, any boat listings, because it was obviously very common, like how it is now. It was required by law that you were registered as a ship. And so strangely enough, the Ourang Medan was not registered. So that was super sketchy, and it made people wonder, like, was this ship even real? Like, was it a real ship? Or was it unregistered for a more suspicious and illegal reason? And so as more and more administrations were looking up to just find the Ourang Medan and just see, like, okay, did it have a different name? That's why it's not showing up. Nothing was showing up. Like, it was just a total ghost ship. No one had any idea anything about this ship. And so on top of that weirdness, people that were skeptics or people that were just interested in this case, they're like, okay, we can't locate the Ourang Medan. We'll cut that loss. What about this Silver Star ship? Where are they? Where'd they come from? What's their deal? And so they started looking it up, and they realized, wait a minute, this ship isn't registered either. Like, what's going on here? What's with all these crazy ships? Nothing is registered. However, that actually ended up being debunked. So the Silver Star was completely a real ship. There was a real crew. This whole situation did happen. However, shortly after this incident and after the Silver Star had not chartered, had docked or what have you, a different company actually ended up buying the Silver Star and renaming it to the San Juanita. And so that's why the Silver Star never showed up in any of these records, because it had been renamed and was then operating under the Santa Juanita. It's still weird though, like, why wasn't the SS Ourang Medan not registered? Like, what's behind that? Some critics of the spooky, ghostly justification, so the non-believers of the ghost, which I feel like a lot of us are like, it was ghosts for sure, there's no doubt about it. Had to be a ghost, super spooky, woo. But so the more critical people and people that are like more realistic and just don't believe in that sort of thing, they were saying that a more probable cause was that this ship was secretly carrying cargo from a Japanese military unit that was named number 731. So it was unit 731, and it was a Japanese ship. And that ship had become notorious for their chemical and biological experiments that they would do on prisoners of war at the time. So Chinese and American POWs. Those poor souls. This ship was notorious for doing that. And so what these types of ships, especially Unit 731, would do is that they would carry hazardous materials for top secret missions. And so some of those materials included potassium cyanide and also nitroglycerin, which were both commonly used during the war. It's possible that these hazardous chemicals, according to this theory, possibly the ship was storing those hazardous chemicals in the ship, and maybe there was a leak or one of them combusted, causing a leak that may have interacted with the cargo as well, causing the toxic gases to be released, poisoning the crew. And so that would explain possibly why everyone's faces were all looking scary and really painful looking, because possibly the gases were hitting them and they all knew that they were suffocating and dying. And that would also explain why no one had injuries or no one had bruises or cuts, what have you, because they had been poisoned. The gas came in, infiltrated, and killed everyone. And that may also explain why everyone had such a swift rigor mortis, because maybe the chemicals had a weird reaction with the cells in their body, causing a quick rigor. However, in addition to that, that would also be an explanation for why the ship exploded shortly after the crew members of the SS Silver Star came on board. Because once they left, possibly the gas leak just got so crazy, the boilers were still on, and that's what caused the fire and the explosion. This theory, to me, I guess that makes sense, sure. But that doesn't explain why when the crew went on to the ship, the Silver Star crew, why didn't they get poisoned? Like, they were fine. They didn't die. Most of them just felt completely fine. They didn't think anything of a gas. They didn't smell anything. And a lot of chemicals don't always have a smell that you can smell, like a poisonous gas. But that's strange that they went on to the ship. They were cruising down into the bowels of the ship. They were looking around, and none of that crew was impacted at all. And it wasn't until they left the SS Ourang Medan that the ship eventually exploded. So that's pretty sketchy. Going back to the Unit 731 ship, people also prophesize that potentially those hazardous materials that were being stored within the Ourang Medan for the Japanese or for whomever, it's possible that they maybe mixed with the salt water because they're in the middle of the sea. Those hazardous materials had a weird reaction with the salt water and potentially also caused sickness among the crew and killing them. Have you ever been like cleaning your bathroom? Or like specifically cleaning your bathtub, and you're using like a bunch of different sprays. You're spraying bleach for the tile because that's getting grimy and moldy or whatever, and then you're spraying the bathtub because you can't use bleach on the bathtub. And then the chemicals, you're in like a small little area, so it's starting to get kind of stuffy in there, and you're like, am I gonna pass out? Is this like am I in danger here? Am I gonna die? So kind of think about it like that. It's possible that they were carrying a lot of different hazardous materials while also being in the middle of the ocean. And so there's a lot of different components going on. Potentially a lethal mixture happened, poisoning the crew. The fact that the ship was also carrying illegal hazardous materials for the war crimes being committed could also explain why the ship was not listed on any registries. Because if you're doing illegal, sketchy shit, chances are you're going to want to fly under the radar. You're not going to be listed on every single registration. You're probably going to want to cruise under the radar, be quiet, or change your name. So it's possible that's the reason why it was not registered. Possibly the most strange aspect of this entire story, one that has really made critics, skeptics, and even spooky paranormal believers scratch their heads, was that the CIA actually got involved in this situation. Once they heard about this incident, they kind of started looking into it. And years later, it was found that a secret letter written by the assistant director of the CIA at the time, C.H. Mack, had mentioned the SS Ourang Medan. And in this letter, which was dated in December 5th, 1959, he states in a statement, quote, "They feel that the tragedy of the SS Ourang Medan holds the, quote, again, secret, unquote, to many of these airplane accidents and unsolved mysteries in the sea." So the letter, when it was found many years later, the recipient, so the person that he was writing it to, they were left anonymous. They had retracted the name on there. So like they put some white out on it. So we don't know who the letter was written to. And so at the very end of this letter, to which Mark concludes in this other to this unknown recipient that, do you think something from the, quote, unknown was involved? The unknown. And he put unknown in question marks. And so that's really strange, right? Like, why is the CIA agent so concerned with this particular incident? Many ships sink at sea. Many ships, I'm sure, are unrecorded. You know, I'm sure that wasn't the first ship to never be recorded. And there were possible explanations. We don't know for sure, but possibly maybe it was like a gas leak, like that would kind of explain things. But this CIA agent is so concerned about other mysterious happenings that he is concerned with this one because he thinks whatever caused this one may have caused or had been related to those other ones. And for this man to use quotation marks around the words secret and unknown, are these code words? Like, why that particular verbiage? Pretty strange. That's essentially it. After that letter, this story has plagued so many different people of walks of life for so long. Many people think it was a paranormal situation. Something got on that ship that was out of this world, that was not of this world, and it took these men by storm, and they didn't even know what hit them, and it was so horrific that everyone was so terrified, and it killed them in an instant. And then on the other hand, we have non-believers and skeptics of that theory that think, no, there's a completely natural explanation for this occurrence. There's no ghosts in the ocean. There's no ghosts that sunk the ship. It was probably something sketchy, or they had some weird hazardous material that killed everyone on board and then caused the fire. But if that were the case, why were the CIA so concerned with this story, and why did they think it may, like whatever happened to them, be so common that it's causing other issues around in the ocean space? And then also, why when the members of the Silver Star went on board, why didn't they get hurt? Why didn't they pass out from any gaseous elements on the boat that killed the other crew so swiftly and quickly? So I don't know, guys. What do you think? Do you think this was a paranormal, spooky occurrence, or do you think it was the hazardous gas? The hazardous gas makes sense to me. Like, I feel like that makes sense, but I'm going to go with the spooky route. I think that's weird that they were able to take their time, look around, and check things out, and then they were able to walk off, and then the boat exploded. So I'm going to go with ghostly occurrence. But that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to know your theories on this. And if you've heard any other information about, like, it's for sure this. But one thing is true. No one's looking for the Ourang Medan. The ship has not been found on the ocean floor either. The Titanic took decades to find once it sank, because it was such a famous ship. Millions of dollars were spent to go and find that ship. So the Ourang Medan is still sitting on the ocean floor somewhere in a dark, murky grave. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I know we did like more of like a candid thing on my couch. This is my boyfriend's metal guitar. I let him hanging on the wall, but I'm still just kind of trying to get my groove of where I want to do my video podcasting and my YouTube videos. So I have a green screen. I like playing around with that a little bit. It's fun, and I could do like spooky backgrounds. That's super cool. But I just wanted to try out being on the couch and see like if you guys liked like the laid back, casual, candid, creepy time on Kim's couch. Ooh, casual, candid, creepy time on Kim's couch. It's kind of like a casting couch, but like creepy couch. Or if it'll be a little more theatrical and we'll go back to the old style of, you know, recording with a green screen, or I'll make a spooky backdrop or something like that. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. It's Memorial Day weekend, so I know a lot of you guys probably have Monday off. So be safe, but don't be too safe. If you're drinking, hydrate. And yeah, all right. It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and I will talk to you guys next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Mwah.